he goes, well, why don't you sing it to me? And I said, here in the restaurant? And he goes, yeah. He goes, sing it to me a cappella right now. And I start singing it to him. I got through the first verse and the chorus, and he held his hand up and stopped me. And he was emotional. And he said,
welcome to When You Look, where ordinary people share their extraordinary experiences, and you get to decide, was it coincidence or God? Dennis, welcome to When You Look. So great to have you on, man.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. Been looking forward to this.
Our pleasure. Truly glad to have you here.
Mine too.
Well, we are excited to hear your story. It's going to be great. I'm confident of that. But before we jump into the story, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, Mick, I've always been a word guy. And even before I started elementary school, I was a word guy. And I could read and spell. And they sent me for tests and stuff when I was 5 or something. And out to the University of Houston, and then I met with kind of weird for a little kid, but my mother took me in to meet with the principal of Janoski Elementary School, and she handed me a book and said, okay, read this for me, and then close it and tell me what you read. And so I did, and so she turned to my mother and she said, he does not need to be in a reading circle. He already reads at a high level. So let me think about how to handle this. And I think these days, the reason I'm telling you this is because this was a transformational thing that I don't know if it could happen today or not, But anyway, the first day of school, I'm sitting in school, I'm trying to acclimate myself to being in a classroom and everything. And it came time for our reading circle, and in steps Ms. McRee, our principal, and she says, Dennis, come with me. And I thought I was in trouble, already. And I just got there, right? And so we step out in the hallway, and I do remember this. She held my hand, and we walked down to the school library. It looked cavernous. I'm sure it wasn't. And I'd never been in a library. It was a little inner city school. We sort of lived in the inner city and, all that. So we didn't do a lot of library museum stuff, right? So anyway, so we walked in and we walked over to the far wall, and there were all these kids' books there. And she said, you know what, Dennis, when these people get in their circle, you quietly excuse yourself and you come down here and you can read all these books for first, second, and third graders. And she turned around, still holding my hand, and looked at this big cavernous library from a corner. And she said, or you can read any of these books because you can read them. And so I'm like, wow. So by the time I got out of elementary school, I had read all the works of Mark Twain, 30 Seconds Over Tokyo, Charlotte's Web. Charlotte's Web was the first thing that I read where I cried. And I was so moved by it. I thought, you can do that with words? And so anyway, that just imprinted me, And so then, of course, in my teen years, shockingly, I loved music, but I didn't play an instrument. And I wrote a song without an instrument. I just sang it. And so I went in the next day to my little job selling furniture or something, whatever I was doing. And my boss had his Ovation guitar, always kept it under his desk. And I sang this all day because back then, there weren't these things where you could record stuff.
Right.
And so I thought, I don't want to forget this. So anyway, it went on all day and he was tired of it probably. And so finally he said, hey, Dennis, what is that? What are you singing all day? And I said, no, this is a song I wrote driving home from a date last night. He said, took his guitar out, said, let's play it. And he played this song and the hook was set. And he put his guitar back and he said, Dennis, it's a beautiful song that has a chorus. It has all the elements of a song. You should go get a cheap guitar, albeit, and you should try to figure out whether you're going to do more of this or not. Well, that, what a great piece of advice. And so I bought a cheap guitar and I started learning chords, and I couldn't learn chords, Mick, without hearing a story, without hearing lyrics and poetry. It's crazy. So anyway, 700 songs later now, 600 to 700, somewhere in there, I'm talking to you today. So that's what I am, and I've been blessed with an amazing wife I met on a blind date who has been a partner in all of this for now 45 years. And she is, she's okay with us stepping off the road of safety and cutting our way through the forest and paving our own road and all that stuff you have to do to do what you're called to do. I'm very blessed. That's probably the bottom line. I get to do a couple of things that I do best. I get to do them every day. So
Yeah.
doesn't get better than that.
Awesome. So if I was to recap some of that, you are a longtime storyteller and
Yes.
longtime musician and
Yes.
longtime husband to your wife.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, we are
All
delighted to
blessings.
have you here. What's that?
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Those are all blessings. Um, People ask me sometimes in these interviews, so how did you make this happen? The answer is I don't know, because I just did what was next, and then what was next brought me here. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of what is next, let's get into your story. But before we kind of jump right into the main event of it, if you will, give us a little backstory and walk us through things as they went for you.
So, I thought I was going to be a professional touring musician until I got children. And I was home with them a lot. And then one day, my wife was working for a manager who managed a big band that was touring with, everybody.
Hmm.
And he called me one day and he said, "Hey, man, you want to go out as Doug Penix?" The band was King's X. He was out with a guy named Billy Squire. And he said, "Look, do you want to go out as his bass tech? Because I know you need the money." And this was in maybe 91 or something. And I said, "Well, I don't know anything about bass guitars." And he said, "Well, you didn't hear the good part. It's $500 a week and a per diem. So just go, okay? Because you could use it." So I'd never toured like that. And I went to Minneapolis, Minnesota from Houston. It was 80 in Houston. It was 12 in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
And I got my credentials and I started out on this crazy carnival for, with two other bands and my band. And, it was just, anyway, I lasted 3 weeks and I got to Salt Lake City, Utah, and I called Susie's boss and I said, "Hey, man, I'm going to tell you something." I said, "I've never been drunk. I've never taken drugs." And I said, "But if I stay out here for a year, like this tour is going to be, I'm afraid I'm going to be doing both. And I think I need to rethink." And he goes, "Hey, you know what, Dennis?" He was so sweet. He said, "Dennis, sometimes the ladder of success is against the wrong wall. And so why don't you come home and think about what you're doing? But I'm going to ask you to do something for me because you owe me. Okay. Because now I got to find some help and everything." And he said, "I'm going to ask you to never stop writing songs because you're a great songwriter." And he said, "However this works out, please don't stop." It was like, so I came home, went to work for the Gallup organization. And I was, and so what I did is I would make a record every now and then and put it out there. And, my stuff got on the radio. It was crazy. And I always was marveling. I'm driving around Houston. I hear my stuff on, this radio station and that one. It was very cool. It was encouraging. But then I would do a gig maybe a couple times a year with a terrific band. And we'd fill up the place and have a good time and everything and do what I do. But most of this was just me chronicling this stuff, Mick, so that I didn't lose it,
Yeah.
And so anyway, in 2000, I did a record. I produced it with a friend of mine, a great friend of mine, Sam Eddy. And we did a pretty good job and it was okay. All original stuff, mostly I don't think there were even any co-writes. It was mostly my stuff. So anyway, so I came home that day and I told my wife, Susie, I said, "I don't know what I'm doing." Okay. I said, I'm not a producer and I'm not an arranger. And I'm just going to not record again. I don't know what I was saying, by the way, but I'm not going to record again until I find somebody who knows how to elevate this music and make it something that I can't make it. And so that began, but I'm going to write, I told her, as if I'm going to go in the studio next week. Okay. So I continued to write at a feverish pace. Okay. And for me at least. And anyway, 18 years went by.
Wow.
And around 2018 or so, 19, I came home one day from somewhere and I sat down on the couch with her and I said, I'm having some issues. I said, I'm in my now almost late 60s, maybe mid 60s at that time. And I said, you know what? I'm afraid I'm going to die. And all of this music is going to be in a drawer somewhere and nobody's ever going to hear it. And the kids are going to come in, our sons will just throw this stuff out. They don't know what it is.
Mm.
And I said, it really pains me. And she said, well, wives have a way of cutting through the crap, And she said, and the fog around you. And she said, well, wait a minute. You have that prayer list that you pray through every morning. It takes you an hour. And every morning at 5:00, you pray for these people, but you don't have anything on there for yourself. And she said, so why don't you put something on there for you? Well, duh, that's a novel idea, right?
No
So I
doubt.
put something on there. I don't even know what I said because I didn't know what I was looking for, really. And so I put that on there and I started praying for this person, faceless, nameless person. And within 3 months now, after 18 years, Mick, within 3 months, we're driving through Nashville and we have these great friends there. The wife is like a daughter. She's been her mother was in my mother's first Sunday school class of 9-year-olds. So we've known each other forever. She married a guy who's a genius. Okay. He's a Georgia farm boy. He came to Nashville. He got world class at everything he does. He is spectacular. And he was playing with Little River Band at the time. He was their lead guitar player, producing records, had his own studio and all that. But I would never have asked this guy because he's my friend. I'd known him for years. And I thought, I know who he's working with. He didn't want to work with an old geezer from Texas that nobody knows. So this is amazing. I telling the story even, it feels unbelievable. So we go to dinner with them while we're in Nashville and we go to this big cavernous Mexican restaurant. By the way, the reverb was fantastic in this room. And this is how I know, because he looks across the table at me and he says, hey, Dennis, what are you working on? Now I was sitting here and all of his wife and kids, their adopted children and Susie, they're all down here. It was just me and him. And he looked across at me and he said, hey, what are you working on? Because I know you're always working on something. And I said, well, I got this new song, Why Not Me, that Susie thinks is the best thing I've ever written. I wrote it on the piano. I've never done that before. And he goes, really? He goes, what are you going to do with it? And I said, you know what, Rich? I don't know what to do with it. Okay. It's like everything else in that drawer. I have no idea. And he goes, well, why don't you sing it to me? And I said, here in the restaurant? And he goes, yeah. He goes, sing it to me a cappella right now.
Wow.
So I started singing, there's a mountain wide and high, reaches halfway to the sky. And I started singing it to him. I got through the first verse and the chorus, and that's all I got. And he held his hand up and stopped me, and he was emotional. And he said, first of all, Susie's right as usual. Okay. And second of all, I'm supposed to help you with this. Did you know this? And I said, no, not till this second. He goes, I am. And I said, well, you want to get some hotshot, Nashville singer to sing on this stuff and maybe like a demo? He goes, no, I want you to sing on it. So we record Why Not Me. I sat at this desk I'm sitting at right now. When I got it back and I listened to the recording of it, I broke down and sobbed. That's how much it moved me. And so I sent it out to 5 people. One of the guys is a Nashville guy who recorded this, said, can I record this song? Can I do something with it? I'm like, well, yeah. And so he records it. He makes it kind of a hit. It became the number 1 song it was being played 1,000 times a week in middle markets and stuff. So anyway, so I was hoping that Rich would do one more song with me, right? I was thinking too small. So he calls me and he goes, hey, what else have you got? And I said, well, I've got this song about forgiveness, kind of a Roy Orbison-ish thing called I Can't Remember. And he goes, well, send it over. Let me hear it. So we record that. And when that was done, he's not a big phone caller. Okay. He's not a big communicator. He called me I thought, did somebody die? You know?
Mhm.
And he said, well, let me tell you this. First of all, I didn't know you had this kind of material. And second of all, I also know when something amazing is happening, and this is crazy. And he said, so let's make an album. I was so, I, you know, I had to contain myself to not just jump for joy in the middle of the call. I didn't want to look foolish, right?
Mhm.
So anyway, we make that record, What Love Makes Us Do. It comes out in 2021. I submit it to NARAS, the Grammy people, in 5 categories, and somebody inside of NARAS thought that it was good enough to make the Grammy ballot. So it made the first Grammy ballot in 5 categories. So fast forward. Remember, I've been writing for 18 years. I have lots of material. We put another record out in 23 called If I Live to Be 100, and it also made the first Grammy ballot in 5 categories. I'm probably not going to win a Grammy, but somebody in the that organization thinks this is pretty good, right?
Yeah.
So it's encouraging more than anything else. So now in about a week, the third album, so 30 songs, and here's what's happened is that the people hear this stuff, they're having a hard time believing it, as am I. And so they're inviting, guess what they're doing? They're inviting me, can you come sing some of this stuff do a house concert at our house? So at the end of July, we're doing this Saturday here, we're doing a gig in Georgetown, Texas, an album release party. And then we'll do 2 in Houston next week. Then we leave and we go on tour. We go to Illinois, Ohio, New Hampshire, Maine. I mean, it's like you turn a corner, you think, you know what, I don't know if anybody really cares about what I'm doing. That's kind of an artist thing. That imp sits on your shoulder and says, you know what,
Mm.
why are you even bothering? I mean, I work with authors in my day job, and and I think all of them at one point in the process go, why am I even doing this? Because nobody's going to care, and that's not your decision. You shouldn't. And this has taught me a lesson. You can teach an old dog new tricks, because I'm learning a bunch of stuff. And one of the things is that, you know what? That is not your job. Your job is to do what you're called to do and be diligent and relentless at it. And if you do, then stuff can happen that you can't imagine, right? And so, anyway, that's the gist of what's happened in the last, really, I guess, 5 years, and it is a transformational change for me. I have people writing with me now that I would love to have written with, and I would never, because these people are renowned,
Mm.
and saying, "Hey, you want to do this with me?" kind of thing. I'm like, "Well, I can try." And I have 2 co-writes on this record with Michael Peterson, who's a platinum selling star. And
Wow.
again, I've known him for 30 years, but I never would have asked him. So anyway, it's all kind of surreal, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Well, Dennis, thank you a ton for sharing all of that. I want to rewind a little bit because you covered so much ground there, but I want to explore a little a little more of the prayer, because you kind of described praying for a faceless, unknown, kind of unidentified person. And it sounds like that was, well, you tell us, why'd you take that approach in your prayer?
Well, uh, because there's nothing like being clueless uh, to make your prayer life better. Just so you know, nobody's ever written a book about that, but it's true. And so I was so at sea about what to do next, and there was a constant rock in my shoe, sort of a nagging that went on all the time, because I knew I was supposed to be doing something with this stuff that's in that drawer. Had no idea what to do with it. I'm like, am I not doing what I'm supposed to be doing? That haunted me. And so since I didn't know uh, what I needed, uh, I thought, well, why not ask God what I need, because He knows everything. So maybe He's got an answer. I mean, it's silly to say maybe. I think
Right.
He know and wants to answer. You have not because you ask not, right? And so that's why. And I still have that prayer book. I still pray through it every morning. it's getting kind of raggedy now. I've been doing that for 10 or 12 years. Uh, and I need to go back and look at exactly what I said because now I'm curious. But it wasn't, hey, send me a producer or send me an arranger or send me a co-writer or how about a record company or any of that. It wasn't that uh, s- uh, finite. It was sort of whatever,
Yeah.
and and I think that's it taught me a lot about praying too. That I mean, I see my prayers answered all the time, but it's one thing if I pray for you and you get well. Let's say you're sick, that's cool. And but this was an imprinting kind of thing where I felt like I was getting a lesson. Like so you've been in church your whole life. You've been a Christian since you were 13, but you don't really know. You don't really know what I can do. So let
Mm.
me wow you, and that's what happened.
Wow.
To answer your question.
Yeah. Yeah. That's quite neat. Let me wow you. So
Mhm.
let's I think kind of stay on that theme a little bit.
Sure.
You're at Susie's behest, you are pray for a couple of months. You guys living in Texas, you're in Nashville, you meet up with Rich and the family. And then he not only asks you, what are you working on? But then after you sing the song, he says, I'm supposed to work with you on this. Tell us a
Yeah.
bit more about that because that's really distinct for somebody to say.
It is. And you know what? When I tell him the story now, we talked about it on these last sessions. I had 3 more songs to cut and went to Nashville and cut them. And he said, I told him, I reminded him of how we started. And he goes, that doesn't sound like me. And I said, I know it doesn't sound like you. It's exactly what happened. And, and I know because it was so stark. It was, and, and, and my heart leapt. And I thought, when he said that to me, I thought, oh, wait a minute. Is this it? Is this going to help me finish well in this life
Hmm.
as an artist? Okay. And then another voice goes, "God, don't get ahead of yourself." Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But in my heart, I thought, you know what, this could be an answer. And sure enough, it's awesome. It's just amazing, you know, uh, and this guy will never know. He's a very humble man and a great father, just a good person. And so he'll never know. And I drive him crazy because I tell him all the time, I hug him and go, "You don't know, man. You don't know what you've done for me." But I don't think he really knows. And I think he's like, okay, well, that's cool. I love you. You're my friend. Isn't it what friends do, kind of thing? And so for him, it's just, but we're having a good time doing it too, which is cool. It's not a lot of drama. You just go do your work. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. Well, Dennis, the direction to pray from Susie, the conversation with Rich, and everything that has transpired since. We asked this question of all of our guests. Would you define that as coincidence or God?
Well, let me just say that if that was the first time it happened in my life, Mick, I would say, uh, let me get back to you on that. Okay.
Hmm.
But, uh, but this has happened my whole life, and people just show up at the right time. And like we talked about in our little pre-conversation, I have two business degrees. I've taken several statistics courses, and we learn about probabilities and stuff. And the probability that these people show up exactly when they're supposed to, over and over and over again, to bring you to the place that you're supposed to be, that if that's not evidence of the living God who cares, then I don't know what else people need to be convinced. The first guy that produced my first record was was in Houston. His name is Kemper Crabb. He's a renowned songwriter and producer. And again, I'd written 10, 12, 15, maybe 20 songs. And all of a sudden, somebody in my church, my pastor goes, "Hey, you ought to be recording some of this stuff." I'm like, "I don't have any money to record."
Mm.
And he goes, "Wait, I know a guy. Okay. I know a guy who can help you in our church." I was in First Baptist Houston, big church, lots of funds, right? So we go see this guy and we walk into his office, and he's a big old man in Houston. And he goes, I walk in, he stands up from behind his desk, and he goes, "Dennis Welch, I'm so happy to see you." And I was like,
Oh.
"What?" And I said, "How do you know me?" He goes, you didn't know? Now, keep in mind, First Baptist Houston has a million, hundreds at least, Sunday school classes. I had sung in his Sunday school class the Sunday before I met him. And
Wow.
when I walked in, he was already saying, "You know what? I love what you're doing. How can I help you?" And then that guy paid for my first album. We had Andre Crouch's touring band on it. We had all this great stuff that happened. All of those songs got on the radio. Every bit of that happened from one Sunday morning that I didn't get paid for, and there wasn't a big crowd. It was just a Sunday school class, and boom, next thing you know. So the guy who produces my stuff, the first record, he called me Denny, and I've only had half a dozen people. My grandmother called me Denny, and I got a 102-year-old author now that calls me Denny, but nobody else calls me Denny. And so he called me Denny. And so I was taking voice lessons from his wife, and I had to drive out to Pasadena, which was an hour back, right? So I get out there, and when I'm leaving, it's late, and I'm kind of tired, maybe a little cranky, and I'm walking out to the car, and Kemper walks out with me, and I notice he's carrying 3 LPs under his arm. And we get to the car, and he goes, "Well, Denny," he goes, "let me ask you a question." He goes, "Are you doing your best work? Do you think that what we're getting ready to do is your best writing?" And I said, "Kemper, why are you asking me this now? We go in the studio Tuesday." And I said, why bring it up today?" And he goes, "Well, because," he said, "you're doing this for God." And he goes, and it doesn't matter what you're doing, what you're writing about, anything. This should be your very best work. And if it's not, we shouldn't do it. We should wait." And I said, "Well," he said, "so listen, I'm going to give you these 3 records." And he hands me 3 albums, okay, LPs.
Yeah.
And he said, "Go home and listen to these, and then call me tomorrow, and I'm going to trust you. And if you think you're doing your best work and you can't do better than this, then we're going in the studio and we're going to cut this music and we're going to put it out in the world." And so he sent me home with the first 2 Dan Fogelberg records, Netherlands and Souvenirs. Are you kidding me? And he sent me home with a Leonard Cohen record. You know what? It killed me. I was mad at him.
Mm.
I called him the next day after I listened. I said, "This is a dirty trick, man." I said, "You knew what was going to happen when a guy sings a song called Souvenirs, and he says, 'Down in the canyon, the smoke starts to rise and rides on the wind till it reaches his eyes. When faced with the past, the strongest man cries.'" I said, "You know what? You knew what that was going to do to me." I said, "So cancel this session, and I'm going to try to get over this, and I'm going to write some more songs and fix these." So that's what I did. And that's why that stuff got on the radio. So you know what? To this day, Mick, I send Kemper Crabb everything I do. And I tell him every time I sit down to write a song, every time I go in the studio, I said, "You know what I hear? Hey, Denny, are you doing your best work?" I said, "What a gift that was. That's iron sharpening iron. So one man sharpens another. You know what? You did something for me that was permanent in there because you had the guts to say, 'Hey, I'm not even going to get paid as a producer now because I'm halting the project for a while.'"
Right.
That's selfless is what that is. And so, so that kind of thing, those kind of stories, we could sit here all day. And those divine appointments is what I call them. Those have happened so often that, I shouldn't have been surprised by this one, but I think because it had been so long and I'd kind of not given up, but I was like, wow, what am I supposed to do? Now I know, pack the car and go play some music. So the long answer to your question is, the short answer is it's absolutely God, in my opinion. So
Yeah, right on. Dennis, so good, man. Thanks for sharing all that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Well, we round things out with the final question, which is, how has your life changed as a result of all of this? And you've shared quite a bit, but tell us a little more.
Well, it's look, anybody who writes a book, that's, I do book publicity. So I bring people to you that have written a book and they want to talk about their book. And I've written 2 books and written all these songs and everything. And the whole point is not, I don't really care if people know me, quite honestly. I don't need that. What I need is I need this stuff to have some impact out in the world. And I see that happening now. And it's starting conversations. I mean, music is the greatest and books are the greatest conversation starters ever. Because people still, you know, appreciate authors and songwriters and stuff and creators. So, and so if they hear something that moves them, you know what they do? They reach out to you and they say, "Hey, listen, talk to me about that." Happy to, delighted. So it's changed our life. Susie and I, because really when we started out, we didn't know what this was gonna. I sat with her one night in a hot dog stand, because I was highfalutin. I mean, I thought a hot dog stand was going out, and I remember sitting with her and saying, I know I want us to get married, and but I need help. I need some help doing whatever is ahead of us. And I need somebody to roll up their shirt sleeves and help me. And while I'm talking to her, I saw her unbutton her shirt and start rolling her shirt sleeves up. So she was already saying, "Hey, I'm with you 150%. Just tell me what you need." And for all these years, we've done that. And what a blessing to have somebody that could step into the gap in the places you can't do, and all the things you can't do. And so she and I talk about it often. Look at the impact this stuff is having now. And so that's how it's changed. I don't feel different. Um, I feel maybe a bit more energy than a lot of people my age have, I would think, because I have somewhere to go and something to do that I think is really important. And so if you want to have if you want your 60s to be your best decade, that's what I tell people. Sometimes people say, "What's your best decade?" I'm like, "The one I'm in." Okay. But that didn't happen by accident. That happened because back there, because look, if you don't proactively plan to be doing something that matters later on, the momentum of the culture is going to sweep you out to pasture. They're going to say, "You know what? Come on, Mick, you're 65, settle down, go sit on the porch. And you know what? And you don't have to." And that's that. I tell my guys my age this all the time. You don't have to do that. Don't be fooled by that. And so all of this is the answer to your question. I almost don't want to sleep at night because I'm anxious to see what tomorrow brings. And that's I don't know. I don't know if that's normal or not, but
Well, it certainly sounds energized, which is quite
absolutely.
amazing.
Amen. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Dennis, how can people learn more and find out more about your music?
So they can come to DennisWelchMusic.com. And there's I think, there's a pop-up ad that lets you give your email address and such, so I can stay in touch. We do a newsletter every month and all that. And that's probably best. If they want to hear this music, really now let's see, 7 albums in a week. They can go to iTunes or any of the streaming services and listen there. And I think on our website there's also a way to email me. And if they want to do that, I'm happy to get those emails. So yeah.
Got it. So Dennis Welch with a CH, DennisWelchMusic.com.
Yep. That's where.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay.
Well, Dennis, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for walking us through a lifetime and giving us 2 specific stories in there that show how God was in action in your life. genuinely
Well, thank
appreciate
you
you
for
being on the show.
Well, I appreciate you. And, you see, I love talking about it because it's just, I still marvel. And so thanks for giving me a chance to marvel.
Was it coincidence or God? You decide for yourself, but I believe you just heard a story for His glory. When You Look is powered by stories just like this, and yours could be next. Go to whenyoulook.com/be-a-guest or use the link in the description below. Drop us a comment and share this episode with somebody that needs it. Until next time, thanks a bunch for listening and watching, and God bless.